So today I'm going to talk about progesterone and bone health. And this is a hormone that is not talked about as frequently as testosterone. It is kind of not as sexy, although what I want to show you is that it's actually really important. And I think a lot of women are not using progesterone that could be using progesterone. And I want to show you how it impacts bone health, not just for postmenopausal women on hormone replacement therapy, but also for perimenopausal women and even for premenopausal women. So stick around if you're interested in hormone therapy. We're going to talk about progesterone and we're going to get into a little bit of the weeds, but this shouldn't take too long. So progesterone is often overlooked when it comes to bone health. When you hear women talk about hormone replacement therapy, and even a lot of doctors, if a woman has undergone a hysterectomy and had her uterus removed, a lot of times if they're going on estrogen therapy, they will be on estrogen therapy alone because we don't need to add a progesterone or a progestin, the synthetic progesterones, because frequently those are only added if we are going to try to protect the lining of the uterus, the internal lining of the endometrium. And so for women who have undergone a hysterectomy, a lot of times that is not added. But remember that when we are looking to reverse osteoporosis, when we're looking to improve our bone health, all of the tools at our disposal should be considered. They should all have a risk-benefit ratio beside them, at least in your head, and understand, hey, could this be helping my bones? What's the risk? Is this something I want to add to my protocol? Progesterone is something we should definitely consider in every case, every female case. Is it right for everybody? Probably not. Can everybody tolerate it? Probably not. But it's something that should be considered. Let me walk you through the evidence that shows just how important progesterone can be. Now, like I said, progesterone is sort of the redheaded stepchild in the literature around hormones. It is not often studied alone. There are some studies of it alone, but it is not often studied alone. It's usually studied in conjunction with some form of estrogen. But we know that progesterone has receptors all over the body, including the bone, definitely including the uterus and other hormone-sensitive tissues like the breast, but is known to impact very tightly things like nerves, arterial function, brain function. Obviously, bone is what we're going to talk about, but it also impacts other things like I mentioned, breast tissue and cancer risk, both high and low, depending on the form of progesterone. So progesterone definitely is something that, again, should be considered, but needs to be taken into context in different scenarios. I'm going to talk about some of those different scenarios. So let's start with premenopausal women. Let's start with women who are normally cycling and they're having a cycle about every month. So most people know that in a woman's menstrual cycle, there is a surge of progesterone in the luteal phase that leads to menstruation. And then you have the follicular phase where estrogen rises and falls. It is the back and forth push of progesterone and estrogen that provokes a lot of the changes that occur within the menstrual cycle itself, including ovulation. Now, ovulation is usually talked about in the infertility circles. So when people are struggling to actually have children, is a woman ovulating or not? But ovulation is more important than just, are you actually able to conceive? Ovulation means that if you're ovulating, you're going through the normal process of the cycle as it's intended for a woman who is of childbearing age. But once the egg comes out and the follicle ruptures from the ovary, then that follicle becomes the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum then secretes progesterone, and that's what drives progesterone higher during the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle. And so that secretion of progesterone during the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle is really important. And we know very clearly that during the luteal phase, bone biomarkers, remember bones leave biomarkers, bone biomarkers show bone building during the luteal phase, specifically bone alkaline phosphatase, P1 and P, they go up in the luteal phase. And that's because of a healthy ovulation, a healthy corpus luteum, and secretion of progesterone. Now, progesterone also seems to help with bone resorption. It actually decreases resorption. So it works on both sides of the fence, meaning that for things that naturally improve bone metabolism, they generally work on both sides. Estrogen works on both osteoblasts and osteoclasts, same thing with progesterone, but they do it in alternating fashion. So they can both impact both sides, but they do it in an alternating fashion, so they're not both doing it at the same time. So the study that I'm reviewing today, which I have a link for in the description below on YouTube, talks about a number of studies. One of the studies that they refer to in this study is an older study that looked at the number of quote unquote normal with ovulation menstrual cycles for premenopausal women and bone health. And what they noticed is that if women were having 5 cycles or less per year, meaning they were having issues either ovulating or having issues with menstruation. But either way, if they weren't having regular cycles and it was less than 5 per year, then they actually started to lose bone. So we kind of use this 5 cycles per year as the magic number, but really for a young woman, she should not only be maintaining bone, but hopefully she still has the capacity to build bone. Although again, most people have their peak bone mass in their early 20s. Now, this might be counterintuitive to some women because a lot of times we think estrogen is the biggest driver for bone health, but it really isn't just estrogen. It's the cycle. It's the push-pull between the estrogen and the progesterone. So when women have what's called a luteal phase deficiency or luteal phase defect of progesterone, these can result in a lot of the symptoms that we hear: PMS, PMDD, mood swings, bloating, breast tenderness, cramping, menorrhagia, painful periods, weight gain, headaches, fatigue, and on and on and on. Again, this isn't really an estrogen problem. Might be an estrogen detox problem, but it's really a progesterone deficiency, and that can lead to all of these things. So then for premenopausal women, it's really important that cycles are normal and that they're not interrupted by things like oral contraceptives. This is where oral contraceptives become right in the crosshairs for somebody who's interested in bone health, because some oral contraceptives will stop ovulation. Guess what happens if you don't ovulate? If you're anovulatory, you're not going to create the corpus luteum. You're not going to have a progesterone surge in the luteal phase. And so you're going to potentially start losing bone on oral birth control. And I do see this in a lot of women where this might be part of the underlying cause of their early bone loss, is because they had irregular menstrual cycles, either a result of, being too lean, being too active, or potentially just being on oral birth control. All right, so let's fast forward then a little bit in a woman's life. And as she gets into perimenopause, hormones start to change. So those normal cycles become a little less normal. One of the things that can happen as women get into this perimenopause window, which can be really between like 35 and 50, it's a very, very wide window, is that we see changes in hormone levels. And typically they're going to be dropping off of hormone levels. That can include estrogen, but it definitely, and probably more frequently, includes progesterone and sometimes testosterone. And so if progesterone is dropping off in the perimenopause timeframe, imagine then that if you are requiring this push-pull of estrogen, progesterone, and all of a sudden you get the estrogen, but you don't get the progesterone, you can start getting some of those same symptoms that premenopausal women got, but also we're going to start seeing an acceleration of bone loss. And we actually do see this in the literature, where women who have more consistent ovulatory cycles actually experience less bone density reduction over time than those that don't. So I think we can see pretty clearly when you look at premenopausal and perimenopausal women that progesterone levels matter. Now, we can take this into the discussion of hormone replacement therapy for postmenopausal women. So let's again fast forward through time. So now a woman goes through menopause. She is technically postmenopausal if she's gone 12 months without a cycle. And a conversation about hormone replacement therapy should be had for every woman, regardless of her anticipated risk factors, and then decide if it's the right thing for her or not. When it comes to whether or not a woman should be put on progesterone, the traditional medical model would say if she has undergone a hysterectomy, she does not need progesterone. So what do? Well, I'm not afraid to use progesterone off-label because I find that there's value. Like I said before, there is evidence to say that progesterone is going to have an impact, obviously, to counterbalance estrogen receptors. I'm not afraid to use progesterone off-label because progesterone is known to have an impact on your nerves, on your brain, on your bones. But when we look at the literature on hormone replacement for bones, you see some interesting recommendations from authors. So when you look at progesterone-only studies, they will say that it is not effective in preventing bone loss. And that is true in women who have high bone turnover. So when we look at studies on hormone replacement therapy in postmenopausal women, you see some interesting findings. So some of these studies will suggest that progesterone on its own will not prevent bone loss. But you have to look at what they were studying. They were studying persistent progesterone, meaning everyday progesterone, and they were commenting on this in women with quote unquote high bone turnover. So they were rapidly losing bone. So progesterone as a bone building agent primarily is just not powerful enough to counteract someone who is rapidly losing bone without estrogen. And we do see that in the studies using estrogen and progesterone together. They are better together, even if you're doing them statically, meaning same dose every day. A little confusing for the receptors, but that's the standard of care. And so you can still see improvement in bone health with static dosing of both progesterone and estrogen together. Now, some studies would actually go a step further to say that estrogen by itself is more beneficial than estrogen and progesterone together. I think we have to be very careful with these recommendations because when they say that, a lot of these studies are looking at studies like the Women's Health Initiative where they were using medroxyprogesterone acetate or MPA or Provera, and that drug was known actually to cause bone loss. So we have to be careful because not all progesterone is the same. So let me make a little statement here about progesterone versus progestins. Micronized progesterone is the quote unquote bioidentical form of progesterone. It's the same progesterone that your body makes. Progestins come in all kinds of forms. A common one historically was MPA, medroxyprogesterone acetate, or Provera. That was Premarin and Provera, Prempro. That's been in a lot of studies. And so a lot of times when you see progesterone, quote unquote, they're actually talking about Provera or MPA, and that has some potentially negative side effects compared to micronized progesterone. Micronized progesterone has been studied independently. So for all of the authors and Instagram and YouTube faces out there that say that there's no research supporting bioidentical hormones, that's crazy because progesterone as micronized progesterone has been studied. It's actually an FDA approved, commercially produced product. So if anybody says that, listen to them for other things other than hormones. Also, estradiol, even if it comes in a patch, is also bioidentical. So there's lots of evidence on bioidentical hormones. Anyway, micronized progesterone is the bioidentical form. It can be taken orally. I'll talk about topical in a second, but micronized progesterone is the form that we recommend that we use because it has less of a side effect profile, less risk. MPA and other progestins can increase the risk of blood clot, increase the risk of cancer, increase the risk of heart attack. There is just really no reason to use them, and yet they actually carry the majority of the market share in the HRT world in the commercial space. So micronized progesterone is what I'm talking about here when I talk about progesterone. So I think what we're going to find in the literature, and this is very clear in the bone health literature, is that progesterone improves estradiol's impact. Progesterone could be used off-label to improve osteoblast function in a low turnover scenario, say, for example, a postmenopausal woman 20 to 30 years out from menopause who may not be a candidate for estrogen therapy. Could she take progesterone and have an impact on bone? The answer is probably. Has it been studied in that population for bone health? No, that'd be an off-label use. But it has so many potential benefits, and some women feel great on progesterone, but not all. So then that's going to bring me to the oral versus topical conversation. So oral progesterone is tolerated by most women, but not all. And when it breaks down into something called allopregnanolone is a GABA agonist, meaning that it works on GABA receptors, which is very calming to the brain, to the nervous system. So for many women, oral progesterone helps them sleep, and they absolutely love it. But not all. Some women can't tolerate even the tiniest dose of oral progesterone, probably because of what it breaks down into in their stomach. And so some women try to use then topical, and some doctors love topical. The problem with topical progesterone is that over-the-counter products aren't strong enough. But let's say you were able to find a prescription strength strong enough topical progesterone, and you were able to get adequate amounts to counteract estrogen if you're on estrogen. The challenge here is that you cannot test topical progesterone in serum. When you test blood, you don't see topical progesterone. Now, it's actually kind of hard to see oral progesterone too, depending on when you take it and what you're taking, but you should be able to capture oral progesterone in serum. Topical, you can't. So then you have to rely on other testing methods, which aren't as well proven, not the standard of care. So we really don't know if we have enough progesterone to balance out our estrogen unless a woman is still cycling or choosing to cycle after menopause, taking some kind of a rhythmic dosing protocol. And even under those circumstances, I would still recommend actually doing regular ultrasounds to make sure that you are not overloading the endometrium and potentially causing hypertrophy and putting yourself at risk for endometrial cancer. All right, so a big picture here is that progesterone is a powerful player when it comes to bone health, and it is often put in the co-pilot position with estrogen, and that is a good position for it to be in. I don't think that estrogen should be used alone, even if a woman has undergone a hysterectomy and doesn't have a uterus, because there are progesterone receptors all over the body. So why would we deprive a woman of progesterone when she's on estrogen? Why can't we use progesterone potentially off-label according to the FDA, but still use progesterone to balance out estrogen in the bones and elsewhere in the body? This conversation of progesterone for women is important in all stages of adult life. So from menarche on, We need to have adequate progesterone during the luteal phase. We need to have ovulation. We need to have normal cycles if we want the benefits of estrogen and progesterone, because they're going to balance each other out. That push-pull is critical for bone. We can then potentially use those same tools as we get into perimenopause and menopause to use progesterone to support perimenopausal women. And then in postmenopause, we can use progesterone, even if a woman doesn't have a uterus, to help support estrogen and bone health, and even potentially cyclically if someone's really looking to optimize the function of progesterone. In my opinion, micronized progesterone is the only choice. Whether or not it's oral or topical is going to depend on how you use it. I don't think that we should ever really be using estrogen alone. Again, progesterone is there naturally in the body to counteract estrogen on a monthly basis. Why would we then give one and not the other if we want the body to optimize its function? So if you have questions about this, other questions about hormones, please consider joining our hormone masterclass. We run a hormone masterclass about every 2 weeks to every month, where we talk about the difference between traditional hormone prescribing, bioidentical prescribing, updated risks and benefit conversations on different scenarios, women that are over 10 years out from menopause, women with potentially concerning histories like family history. We basically run the gamut of all the patients that we've seen in our practice who have these extenuating circumstances that don't fit in the tight little box that NAMS and ACOG want people to be in before they start hormone replacement therapy. So we talk about alternatives. We present some pathways forward. Our goal there is just to educate people. It's totally free. Look for the link in the description below. But remember that osteoporosis is not the end. Deciding to reverse it is a beginning. I'll see you in the next video.